When Karen from the HOA decided to steal my solar panels to power her house without paying a cent, she thought she'd get away with it. I installed those solar panels with my own money, after months of saving every penny to reduce my electricity bill. All approved, all forms signed. No violation of HOA rules. But of course, that didn't matter when she was involved. The HOA president, a woman who acted as if she ruled a small medieval kingdom rather than a condominium, never missed a chance to poke her nose into other people's lives. Every time I went out to check the boards, I felt those eagle eyes piercing me from her balcony, as if she was planning something. And then, one day, I came home and realized that something was strange. The electricity bill, which should have gone down because of the solar energy, was even higher than before. I went straight to check the panels, and of course, they were gone. All 4 of them, ripped out as if they had never existed. No note, no explanation, nothing but an empty space where my investment should have been. Who steals solar panels? This isn't a microwave. It's not a bicycle that you can just throw in the back of your car and drive off. This requires planning, and that's when I realized the woman's house was different, brighter. Over the last few days, even after sunset, you could clearly see that her house shone like a fucking Christmas tree. What used to be normal lighting now looked like a New Year's Eve event. It couldn't be a coincidence. So I did what anyone with a shred of sanity would do. I went out to the garage, got my flashlight, and, in the dead of night, went to investigate. And there they were, my panels, beautifully installed on her roof, without ceremony, without trying to hide it, as if they had sprung up there all by themselves. At that moment, I felt something between shock and admiration. She really had the nerve to steal my panels and pretend they were hers. What's worse, no one in the neighborhood seemed to think it was strange. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they just didn't want to get involved. But me? Oh, I was going to get involved. She wanted free solar energy. Then I was going to give her a reality check. If you've ever dealt with these types of people, you know that direct confrontation doesn't work. Arguing? Useless. Calling the police? Good luck trying to convince them that a respectable woman from the HOA reached up and ripped solar panels off someone else's roof. No, that called for something more creative. I'm not the type to be taken for a ride. So instead of screaming or banging on her door like a lunatic, I decided to play her game, calmly, with strategy, and with a slight touch of electricity. But first, I had to make sure that no one was going to dispute that those panels were mine. Because, you see, this woman not only stole, she was a pro at distorting reality. If I didn't have proof, she would surely convince the whole neighborhood that the panels had always been hers, and that I was making it all up. So, first step, documentation. I went to my receipts folder and took copies of everything. The purchase of the panels, the HOA approvals, even the email messages exchanged with the supplier. Then I photographed every detail of the theft, the makeshift installation on her roof, the poorly connected wires, even the footprints on my lawn that led directly to her house. Now I was ready. I could very well call the police with this and maybe get some justice. But the problem was that I knew this woman very well. She would probably get away with it. She would claim that she bought it secondhand or hired someone who cheated her. What's more, I didn't just want to get my panels back. I wanted her to learn a lesson. That's when the idea of an electric fence was born. Well, technically, my fence was already electric, but like a good neighbor, I kept the voltage low, just enough to keep out curious animals. However, with a little tweaking, let's say it would give a reality shock to someone who didn't know what they were doing. The idea was simple. Since her panels were now installed illegally, the wiring was a mess. If anyone tried to mess with the cables or connect something new, I wanted them to feel the wrong decision in their fingertips. So I spent a few hours rewiring my fence and connecting a homemade system to ensure that, when the time came, she would punish herself for her own greed. And then I waited. I knew this woman was obsessed with control. If she noticed any problems with the panels, she wouldn't call an electrician. No, because that would mean admitting she'd done something wrong. Instead, she would try to fix it herself. And the next day, just as I was finishing my breakfast, I heard the scream. A scream cut through the air, a mixture of surprise and sheer indignation, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone falling. I smiled. I got up calmly, went to the window, and what did I see? The woman was on the ground, holding her hand as if she had been struck by lightning, which, in a way, had been exactly the case. The scene was worthy of an award. The woman was lying in her own yard, clutching her hand as if she had just stuck it in a hive of electric marimbondas. Her hair, normally combed as if she were going to give a TV interview, was disheveled. His face, a mixture of panic and indignation, as if the electricity had done her a personal injustice. I stood there on my balcony, holding my cup of coffee and savoring that moment, as if it were the first sip of a perfectly brewed espresso. She looked around, making sure no one saw her in that humiliating position. Unfortunately for her, I saw everything, and of course, fate was generous enough to ensure that another spectator had a privileged view, the letter carrier. The poor man, who was passing by with his bag of mail, stopped in the middle of the road, his eyes widening at the bizarre scene. The woman tried to get up with the dignity of a fallen queen, but her arms were still a little numb. And then came the icing on the cake. She pointed at the panels, at the fence, and started to say something, but the second she tried to take a step, her legs failed her. A delayed electric spasm ran through her body. The letter carrier coughed, clearly trying not to laugh. I just kept watching, enjoying every second of that live disaster. Now, any rational person at that moment would recognize defeat. Any human being with the slightest bit of shame would accept that it had gone too far and try to back off before it got any worse. But this woman? Oh, no. After finally pulling herself together, she looked straight at me. I knew what was coming. She marched right up to my fence, with steps that were still a little shaky, and stopped there, trying to regain her tone of superiority. "That was a crime!" she squawked, pointing a still shaky finger in my direction. I put my coffee aside and raised an eyebrow. "A crime?" I asked, feigning innocence. "You electrocuted me. That's dangerous. That's illegal. That's my fence on my land that you tried to sabotage." She closed her mouth for a second, opening and closing it like a fish out of water. Then she pointed at the panels on her roof, changing tack. "What about your panels? You can't just connect them to your fence. That could cause damage." "Ah, so now the panels are mine? Interesting." I crossed my arms and looked her right in the eye. "So you admit that these are my panels?" The silence was delicious. She opened her mouth, tried to say something, but realized that anything she said would condemn her even more. She pressed her lips together, furious. Then, like the true manipulator she was, she tried to turn the tables. "That was a trap. You set me up. You wanted me to get hurt." I shrugged. "It's not my fault you decided to get your hands on my property. What did you think was going to happen? That I'd just accept the theft?" She turned red, then purple, then a color I didn't even know it was possible for a human being to achieve. I knew that, at that moment, she was desperately looking for a way out. Some way to come out on top, some excuse, some final card to reverse the humiliation. So she did what anyone without arguments does. She called the police. Have you ever seen someone pretend to be a victim so strongly that they almost convince themselves? Because that's exactly what happened when the police arrived. Two officers got out of the car, and before they could even ask what was going on, the woman shot towards them like a rocket, loaded with drama and falsehood. "Officers! That man tried to kill me!" If the officers had anything in their mouths at that moment, they would surely have spat it out in surprise. The two exchanged quick glances before turning back to face the woman, who was now giving her best Oscar-worthy performance. She was holding her own hand as if she had just escaped from a torture session, and pointing at me as if I were a psychopath who had just electrocuted her out of pure evil. I, on the other hand, remained where I was, calmly leaning against my gate, arms crossed, enjoying this ridiculous spectacle. Finally, one of the policemen snorted. "Right. Can you explain exactly what happened?" The woman began an endless litany of phrases, exaggerations, and even a few fake tears to try and sell the story that she had been attacked for no reason. According to her, I had set a deadly electric trap to hurt her, and that my fence was a danger to the whole neighborhood. If you didn't know the truth, you might even feel a twinge of pity. But I did. The problem for her? She said too much, because in the middle of the dramatic outburst, she gave herself away without even realizing it. "True, he connected that fence directly to the solar panels on my roof," she shouted, indignant. "This is sabotage. It's vandalism." The policeman raised an eyebrow. "Are the panels yours?" And then came the awkward silence. The woman blinked a few times, realizing that she had fallen into her own trap. She stood there, probably trying to find a way to turn this mess to her advantage. But before she could open her mouth again, I stepped in. "Non bother. They're mine. I have the purchase receipts, all the HOA approvals, and even the photos of the robbery." The cops were much more interested now. "Theft? That's right, officers," I continued, reaching for my cell phone with all the calm in the world. "My panels were ripped off my roof and magically ended up on hers. Here are the before, during, and after photos. Here are the purchase documents. And if you need me to, I can also call the supplier to confirm that they were delivered to my address and not hers." They both leaned over to look at my cell phone. I didn't even have to show them much. The evidence screamed itself. By the time the policemen looked at the woman again, their faces had changed. That professional, neutral expression had given way to the classic, "You're screwed." "Ma'am," one of the officers said, with a firmer tone, "can you prove that these panels are yours?" Her answer was a masterpiece of human desperation. I thought they were mine." "She did." The other policeman sighed. "So you didn't buy these panels?" The woman turned white, then red, then white again. It looked like her brain was blowing fuses trying to find a way out. "I thought they were a donation to the community." "Donation?" I laughed. "Halt! The HOA won't even accept you planting different flowers in the garden without prior approval." But now she wanted to convince the police that she would accept solar panels donated from beyond? The policemen weren't having any more of it. One of them got on the radio and started calling for backup, while the other took off his handcuffs. And at that moment, it hit her. "No!" she screamed. "You can't do this! I am from the HOA. I am president." The policeman didn't even blink. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." As he recited her rights, the woman floundered like a fish out of water, screaming as if they had just announced that the world was ending. "I've run this neighborhood for years. I decide the rules here. You don't understand. This is my neighborhood." Ah, the sweet sound of justice. The neighbors, who until then had only been watching from their windows and doors, began to leave. Some people were already recording with their cell phones, and, to my surprise, some even started applauding. Not because she was being arrested per se, but because finally someone who had been abusing power in the HOA was getting what she deserved. And then, when the officers put her in the car, she looked at me. Her face was a mixture of pure hatred and despair. "It's not over," I smiled. "Of course it isn't. You still have to pay my electricity bill." And with that, the car door was closed. Epilogue: after the scandal, the HOA tried to hush up the case. They said that the woman acted alone and that they were re-evaluating the organization's guidelines. Translation: they were desperate not to be sued along with her. I got my solar panels back and installed a security system this time, in case another idiot had the same idea. Her house was without electricity for a few weeks, which I thought was a pretty fair punishment for someone who tried to steal solar energy. As for the woman, she faced several charges, including theft and misuse of private property, which meant she now had a lot of free time to think about her mistakes. Behind bars. And me? Well, I was finally able to enjoy clean, renewable energy that I paid for out of my own pocket, without having to support a parasite. And don't forget to comment on what you thought of the video and leave a like.